It is that time again, mailbag time for the month of June, released just a little bit into the month of July here. It is Thursday, July 6th. We're glad you're with us. Happy July 4th week. I'm Bobby Trossett, Sarah Ellison alongside as well. And we got a lot of questions to go through just a few weeks out from training camp, Sarah. You would have thought that being that we're in the dead of off season, it's a dark week for the most part in the NFL world, as everybody gears up for, the long, grueling season, that we wouldn't have a lot to cover. But I think, when you took to Twitter, I took to my outlets. I think, no, there is quite a few things that we got to get into. So you ready to roll?
Yeah, let's jump right in.
All right. The first one comes in courtesy of, and again, we always prioritize our patrons who sign up for our Q&A mailbag level tier. It's a great way to support what we're building here in Baltimore through the vault. You can check out what we're offering by visiting patreon.com/RavensVault podcast. And the first one comes in through Brian Spar, a returning patron. I continue to find Sarah and you very informative and entertaining. His question: what is Josh Bynes doing? Is he hoping a team has injuries or problems at inside linebacker and signs him? I half expected him to retire and become a Ravens coaching intern. Sarah, I think he's a great candidate for somebody who's going to be on the staff when his playing days are over. I've looked into this question. I haven't seen anything retirement wise. We know that last year he spent some time on the practice squad towards the end of the season. So perhaps I still follow him on social media. He seems like he's getting a lot of family time in. So maybe something's coming at some point soon, but nothing's official yet. He's surely one thing that you cannot question whatsoever is how reliable he's been for the Ravens over the last couple of years at the linebacker position. But the bottom line is they've shored up that position. They have the best off-ball linebacker in the league, the highest paid off-ball linebacker in the league in Roquan Smith, and a pretty decent sidekick as well in Patrick Queen.
Yeah, he's 33 years old now. I feel like in the past there's been times where he signed like in the middle of the season. I'm pretty sure the Ravens picked him up that one time when he saved the day. I can't remember how many years ago that was with injuries, and he kind of came in and saved the day. So I don't expect he's officially still listed as a free agent, not officially retired. I just don't expect the Ravens to pick him up. I think they're pretty solid all the way through the depth chart at linebacker. All right.
You just never know with a guy like this. He's got so much pride. He's always going to be available, you think, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, he's lost his step. What he can do is he brings knowledge and he can help put people in the right place. And the Ravens have that with Roquan, and actually Patrick Queen going into his 5th year doesn't need as much of that support, although it never does hurt. But the Ravens have their veteran who knows what he's doing with Roquan. All right. The next question comes from Joe Bonzel. He's also a patron. He says, what would a contract extension look like for Kevin Zeitler? So that's a great question because we know that Kevin, even though he's not holding out, he went to mandatory practice. He participated, but was it either Schefter or Ian Rappaport, I can't remember which one, reported that he is indeed looking for a new contract. So that's a good question. Looking at him here, he is entering the final year of his 3-year contract. He has been nothing but just reliable and solid at that right guard spot. It feels like the Ravens, it wasn't until Zeitler came around that the Ravens found a replacement for Marshall Yanda. So this year, his cap hit looks like it's at $5.2 million. He's getting paid though. His base salary is 1.1, so that's what he's making. His cap hit is from, the bonus that he got. You know what I should look into? Actually, a good thing that would put us in here is, when you're at the end of your career, like you are with Zeitler, but still playing well, to me, this is the time where you start giving a bunch of 2-year deals. And then that way you're kind of leaving it up to the veteran to decide when he wants to retire. That is exactly what they did with Marshall Yanda. Now the prices have gone up, but where was he at here? Do you have those numbers? Do you have a specific number you have, Bobby, as I look this up for Marshall Yanda?
I don't have a specific towards the end with Marshall, you mean?
No. I mean, just like, did you have a number that you would sign Zeitler for?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. I mean, like you said, it's a cap hit of 5.2 for 2023, but that's like you said, that had to do with the signing bonus. So I don't know. I think I didn't have a specific number in my mind. No.
Yeah, I'm looking at Marshall's. That seemed like a lot. I'm looking at Marshall's. He got paid quite a bit more than I'd be comfortable paying Kevin Zeitler. Yeah, I mean, I would more sign him in that, I guess a three to four maybe million range per year.
Yeah.
I guess maybe you could justify 5. His last one, his average when he signed with us 3 years ago, he got an average salary of 7.5. So, he's older and therefore, probably less expensive. So, yeah, I mean, maybe around that 4 or 5 million a year range. He's certainly producing, enough to justify that kind of number.
No kidding. Yeah, he really has stabilized that position. So we'll see. We'll see what happens during training camp if more of this buzz starts. But yeah, Adam Schefter, to answer your question from a second ago, kind of got that started around the start of minicamp, which he did show up for, and he was a participant at. Let's keep moving here. Carl Neff chiming in. Our next question. Hey, Sarah and Bobby, love what you two are doing. Betting on yourselves to do what you love for the team you love. I feel your energy every episode, and I'm a big fan. Appreciate that, Carl. He had a question about J.K. Dobbins. And Sarah, you had mentioned that J.K. should be expecting a big paycheck if things go the way you think they will this season. But I'm curious as to how much. Having the three-headed monster of running backs and the way they rotate, how big of a new deal do you imagine they'd give J.K.? Also, what kind of numbers does he need to put up to deserve it? Will the team focus more on J.K. under Monken? Have fun with the numbers. Keep up the amazing work. Thank you. Well, I sure, J.K. sure hopes that he's going to be more involved and more focused on under Todd Monken, because we all learned last year it really wasn't any news that he wanted to be more involved, but we all were reminded of that after the Bengals lost. But you put together some of the numbers of the running back market. What'd you come up with?
Yeah, so this season I don't think he's getting much. We just talked with Jeff Zrebiec. That hasn't been. I guess by the time this episode comes out, we will have already released the Jeff Zrebiec stuff. So I guess I can talk about this freely. But if he wanted something this season, the way Jeff Zrebiec made it sound is that JK is a little not feeling right that Gus and Justice Hill are both making more than him. So if he wanted something now, to me, it would be like, all right, well, we can pay you more than Gus and we can pay you more than Justice, but we're not going to pay you among the top 10 running backs. So to me, based off of the way the question is posed, is if everything went right for him. So if everything went right, he would definitely be rushing more than 1,000 yards, maybe 11, maybe 1,200. I don't know what the rotation will be, but I do know that, again, this is going back to like ideal scenario in 2019 when Lamar rushed for 1,000, and so did why am I forgetting his name? Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram went over 1,000. Yeah, Mark Ingram went over 1,000, and at that time Gus Edwards was there, and Gus had a good season, and so that is possible if Dobbins can take on that true Mark Ingram role and still go above 1,000 yards, get, I don't know, 8 or 9 touchdowns, maybe 10. Again, if we're talking about an ideal season. Now, if he does that, then I think that justifies paying him among the top 10 of running backs. I have a hard time seeing him get Christian McCaffrey numbers because Christian isn't quite the traditional running back and creates production in so many different ways. So McCaffrey is making $16 million a year. Even if things go right, I don't think J.K. Dobbins can make that. But I do think maybe he could be paid between the 3rd and 7 top paid running backs. All those guys are basically in $12 million range, $12 million per year. So if everything went right for J.K. Dobbins, that's how much he would make. I'm not saying the Ravens would sign him to that. In fact, this is, an early thought. Maybe I'll change my mind come this time next year. But to me, with Lamar Jackson, I don't see how you can justify paying $12 million a year to a running back when I feel like so many running backs could have success with Lamar Jackson by their side as a decoy, as somebody who is a threat. So I think he could maybe make $12 million in that ideal season on the market. I just wouldn't advocate that the Ravens pay him that.
In terms of, will a team focus more on him under Monken? I'd love to see what we saw a little bit of him flashes here and there during his rookie year. And that is in the passing game, whether that be checkdowns, whether that be in the screen game. That's the type of creativity that I'll be looking forward to seeing both with Gus and JK under Monken's new philosophy. Let's keep moving here. John Gray, we'll switch over to some tweets that came in as well from your call out here. John Gray at CallMeJG. What is the narrative? Why is the narrative, I should say, with Josh Allen, he needs more weapons versus Lamar, he's out of excuses. I know we both immediately flagged this when we were going through the ones that we wanted to cover. And look, there's so many different angles to take on these types of narratives, because I like to go right to the crux of it. Where does this come from? Well, typically it's from a national media outlet that the narrative sometimes seems juicier than it really is. And the next thing you know, all these outlets start to react to that national narrative, and it becomes this overblown narrative. Now, perhaps maybe this isn't overblown. Maybe this is factual in the sense that, yeah, for whatever reason, this is something that's unfair to Lamar. I go back and forth on it. I never like to get too bought in and invested to narratives, but we know that Lamar is one of the most unfairly critiqued athletes in the NFL. Right or wrong. That's how it's been throughout his 5+ years now in the league as he gears up for year 6. And with Josh, I go back to these prototypical quarterbacks, Sarah, that play the game, even though he does both on the ground and through the air really well, like Lamar, not to Lamar's level, but he's very effective at both. They're looked at as darlings, the pocket quarterbacks, and Lamar is different. He's unusual. He's unique. We've talked about this so many times. And so for whatever reason, there becomes this new set of parameters, these new, guidelines that Lamar must abide by versus what the darling Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, old school, prototypical in the pocket quarterback has to live through. Do you feel the same way there? I think you muted yourself there.
Of course I did. So classic. I guess a little bit. I do agree that Lamar has been criticized in different ways because he's not the, traditional NFL drop back quarterback. But in this case, in the question that's being posed here, I actually understand this narrative a little bit. And not that I think that you never know what's going to happen to a season. Like if OBJ and Rashad Bateman get injured again, then people are going to say that. Like, people are going to say, well, that's kind of a big deal. You're left with Zay Flowers, a rookie who could break out, and you're left with Nelson Aguilar, who hasn't caught on anywhere. So could there still be an excuse if Lamar doesn't perform? Sure. They got him a new, but I think that the reason why this narrative has begun is because of how much the Ravens have done for Lamar this offseason. They made him the highest paid quarterback. They got him a new offensive coordinator, an offensive coordinator where Lamar himself is saying, I love where this is going. He's giving me the keys. Lamar has said that twice now. He's giving me the keys. They got the wide receiver that Lamar asked for. He said OBJ and DeAndre Hopkins. They got one of the two. And then they drafted another first-round wide receiver. There's not much more the Ravens could have given him, right? So if there are no injuries, yeah, they gave him a lot of stuff. Then you go over now last year, the last several years, we've all been saying, including the national media, that Lamar needs more weapons ever since 2019. We've been saying, yes, he has a tight end, but outside of that, he has probably the worst wide receiver core or one of the worst in the NFL. And so that's where that narrative's coming from. Meanwhile, Josh Allen, I'm looking at their roster, and obviously he has Stephon Diggs. Okay, that's a sweet wide receiver. But he really doesn't have a phenomenal tight end. I'm looking at here. Stephon Diggs, he definitely led the receiving corps, right? He had almost had 1,500 yards last year. But then there was a big drop off to Gabriel Davis to 846, and this is for a pass first offense. Then it goes down to their highest tight end put up 517 yards. That's not anywhere close to a Mark Andrews level. Then there's, Isaiah McKenzie, Devin Singleton, or Singletary. They added this offseason Cole Beasley. So I don't think outside of Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen does have a lot of weapons. So to me, this is actually one of the few narratives that actually makes sense. There's some narratives that I'm like, this makes no sense it's just where people coming up with this. This one makes a little bit more sense to me. However, I would just say if there's like a run of injuries, then yeah, people can point that out for Lamar.
For whatever reason, there continues to be this media obsession with the Justin Herberts, the Josh Allens, and don't get me wrong, like these guys are great, talented quarterbacks, but I think they become darlings because you fall in love with the way they look the part, the way they play the position, the way they stay in the pocket. And Lamar has always pushed those boundaries, right? And that's what makes him special. We'll see if both types of quarterbacks can get to the mountaintop. We'll see. Captain Defense is up next. Of course, a loyal supporter of ours. Appreciate you at DCapped on Twitter. And he wants to know who's going to be the Ravens' third cornerback. And I think this is a great question. I don't know if I feel confident about this answer yet, being that we're still a month away from training camp. But something tells me that he's not currently on the roster right now. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I know that when we talked with Jeff, he mentioned a name like Kyle Fuller. I think the Ravens were pretty high on him from a depth standpoint last year before he tore his ACL, unfortunately, in week 1 on that MetLife Stadium turf that they finally went artificial, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this offseason. It was against the Jets that game. Look, obviously you hope for the best for young guys like Pepe Williams and Jalen Armour-Davis and a vet in Kevon Seymour. And we know Brandon Stevens has shown versatility between safety and corner. And I'm just not ready to buy into a rookie in Kyu Blue Kelly, even though a Stanford kid, they've never drafted a kid out of Stanford. He's extremely smart. He's insightful. And seems to be well studied, and he spent a ton of time in college. Like he had a lot of reps and experience at Stanford, so perhaps that helps him, in fighting for playing time early. But I would not be surprised if it's a name that's not yet on this roster, at least at the time of this taping before camp.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one thing that made it difficult to know is Pepe Williams and Jalen Armour-Davis were both banged up during, OTAs and mandatory minicamp, and there's only so much you can learn from that anyway because of, they're not in pads or anything like that. So the name that started to emerge that is on the roster is Ardarius Washington. People talking about putting him in that nickel role. I also think that the Ravens missed out by not being able to get Adrian Amos. Remember, there was all this talk that he had 2 visits with the Ravens and he ended up signing with the Jets. And I say that only because Kyle Hamilton played a lot of nickel. He played a lot of nickel last year. And so that would have given some flexibility there that maybe you wouldn't have to use like a traditional cornerback, like to have the 3. So, it doesn't like make me excited when everybody's like, oh, it was Ardarius Washington that kind of stood out. And maybe I wasn't there. Maybe he all of a sudden turned it on from the last couple of years that he's been there. So that's why I'm with you. I have a feeling that it's somebody who's not on the roster yet. All right. Dylan, he asks, who do you think is most likely to win the left guard role on offense? And what does Gino's role look like this year? So, sounds to me that, obviously, it sounds like John Simpson seems to be in the lead with that. He's the veteran that the Ravens signed who was with the Raiders last year. He's got some starting experience. But obviously, Salah Amuvai-Laulu is definitely in the mix. He got some time with the ones. John Harbaugh said that he looked good with the ones. So we'll see once the pads come on. Obviously, Ben Cleveland is in that mix, but it sounds like he's further down the pecking order, which is it's disappointing. It's disappointing. This is year 3. He was a 3rd round pick. He came in with a lot of fanfare. He had me excited. So yeah. So here's who I hope I hope Saleh wins it. Not because I like him better than John Simpson or anything like that, but to me, it would just be an awesome thing for the Ravens if a 6th round rookie comes in and blew away the competition that you had there from a 3rd rounder who had been there for 3 years and to a veteran with John Simpson. And then all of a sudden you've got a rookie, a cheap rookie for 4 years. It seems like the Ravens rookies at left guard, they've been coming on strong towards the end of their rookie contract, like their 4th year, like with Powers. Or we were hoping it would happen with Cleveland in the 3rd year. And then you lose them again and you got to start all over again. So it would be the best news if Saleh could win it so that you could have 4 years of a cheap rookie on a deal there at left guard. But I'm not ready to say that he's going to win it. It sounds like John Simpson is still the leader.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. That works for me. And it seems like anything is possible with the way that Ben Powers emerged this time last year. I don't think anybody really saw that coming. So that shows you that there is some wiggle room here, and there could be a pretty heated positional battle coming up in a month during training camp. So that'll certainly be something to watch. As far as Geno Stone's concerned, depth provides some solid depth at safety. Obviously, in the last couple of years, he's provided them. He's really kind of gotten them out of some sticky situations in the injury. From an injuries standpoint. So he'll continue to do that from a depth sense, and also can contribute to special teams. Let's keep things moving here. VA Dimes at 1112 Passion on Twitter. Which young defensive player has the highest ceiling? Kyle Hamilton, David Ojabo, or Odafe Oweh? And I like this question because I think you could go in a number of different directions. I'm going to go with the guy who's hot right now. And who's hot right now? We've all been talking about David Ojabo. This is essentially his rookie season, having missed the majority of last year, coming off the torn Achilles. What we saw of him at Michigan is that he is explosive. He is a game changer. He's quick off the edge. He's powerful. I mean, this guy is Chuck Smith, who's the new Ravens guru pass rush specialist, so much so that they call him Dr. Rush, as we've covered. He has been adamant during his media sessions that this guy looks the part and he's everything that he was supposed to be. Now, again, this is without pads. This was without a training camp under his belt. This is without a full offseason under his belt, coming off of last year's rehab. So I want to be cautiously optimistic here, but at the same time, I don't, because this guy was supposed to be a top 15 pick a year ago.
Yeah, so I can't disagree with that. Because I haven't seen David Ojabo, we haven't seen him in really over a year. I mean, we saw him a little bit at the end of last season. He got that great sack against the Bengals, much needed late in the game. But because I haven't seen him this year, I personally can't be like, okay, it's for sure David Ojabo. So I'm going to go with Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton is here's what I like that gives me a lot of excitement about Kyle Hamilton is how much he grew so quickly, how much he learned from his mistakes. So if you, Jeff Zrebeck did a Q&A with Kyle Hamilton, and they kind of got into that Miami Dolphins game, which was just brutal, such a brutal loss. The Ravens had I think a 21-point lead or something like that in the 4th quarter. And then the defense just kept breaking down. And in that Q&A, Kyle Hamilton was like, people still make fun of me for having two MAs, so 2 missed assignments. And I remember him struggling in that training camp practice open to the media at the stadium. So he was struggling. And then within a couple games, he just kept getting better. And remember, he was playing that nickel role, which, he played a little bit of, but it wasn't like, it's not his strong suit. He's a safety, And so to see so much growth from him, whereas take, for example, Odafe Oweh, this is going into his 3rd year now. He has not had the same skyrocketing growth that I saw from Kyle Hamilton. Now, granted, Kyle Hamilton was a number 14 pick. Odafe Oweh was, I think, in the 30s. I think he was 31. So, there's a big difference between number 31 and number 14. And then some people, and we were even surprised that Kyle Hamilton was there at 14. He also was projected to be a top 10 pick. So yeah, I think just because of the growth I've already seen from Kyle Hamilton, just skyrocketing from holy cow rookie moment to becoming a big impact on the defense. And then this year he's going to be starting all 17 games unless he's injured. I'm sure, David Ojabo will be in some sort of rotation unless he takes off the same way Kyle Hamilton does. But because I've seen it with my eyes and I haven't seen it with Ojabo, I'm going to go with Kyle Hamilton.
Sure.
All right. Next question is from Holly. Which rookie do you think will have the most immediate impact this season? So just as a reminder, let's go. Remember, this was not a very big rookie class. Obviously, we all know Zay Flowers was number 1. There was no second round pick. So we got to go to the third round. Trenton Simpson, who looks like a beast, but he is not going to have, as long as Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith are healthy, he's just not going to have the opportunity to have, special teams. Maybe he'll get on some rotations. I know he's good at rushing the passer. He's pretty good at coverage. So maybe they find a way. Maybe they find a role for him if he pushes his way in. Maybe they'll find a role for him on the defense, but he just isn't going to have the same opportunity. Tavarius Robinson, the defensive end, he could have some opportunity if he balls out. I just haven't heard his name much the last couple of weeks. Caillou Blue Kelly, I'm not really seeing. Saleh. If Saleh were to win the left guard role, which I don't know will happen, but if he were to win it, then I would pick him, because if you win it, you're playing 100% of snaps, 100%. Yeah. So I just don't know if he's going to win it. Then there's Andrew Voorhees, who is taking a redshirt year, essentially going to be rehabbing, and then the Ravens don't expect him to come alive until next year. So to me, it's going to be between Saleh and Zay Flowers. Because again, this has the same thing I said with Ojabo. I haven't seen it. I don't know if Saleh is going to win the left guard spot. So because of that, I think the default goes to Zay Flowers, because I know he's going to get in the rotation. And so he'll have a chance to have an impact, even with how crowded the wide receiver room is now. So I'm going to go with Zay. And then obviously Saleh can come in last minute if he wins the job.
Yeah. Zay's the shoe-in, obviously. If Saleh gets the job, to your point, he's going to be working every single snap, whereas Zay's going to be having to kind of, share the load with what we know has been a revamped wide receiver room. So any other prediction would just be disingenuous, because then you'd essentially be saying there's going to be some sort of injury at cornerback or, right, in the outside linebacker room, things of that nature. So I'm not going to go down that, road at all. Let's keep moving here. Kadri, our guy, Q, Super Bowl champ, friend of the show, the Baltimore media member, analyst, you name it. My golf partner. Where are you at, Q? Trolling Sarah. I think, from a past episode, if you guys remember, I want to say it was the schedule release night, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he's a big Charlie Kolar guy, as we learned a couple months back. And he would like to know, how do you think the second-year tight end out of Iowa State will do in training camp? And remember, Charlie is a big body guy, huge catch radius, missed pretty much all of last year to the aftermath of a sports hernia surgery that he had to go through. I believe it was right around the start or during training camp. So we don't have a ton on him, but again, he's a big body that is mobile, that's a reliable pass catcher. And you never know, Q. Who knows? If they go 11 personnel like Orlando Brown Jr. seems to think they will all the time, we're not going to see him very often. But for your sake, Q, I hope they have more than one tight end on the field so we can get a full analysis of this guy, and that Sarah and you can finally have your final hoorah on this conversation.
I literally do not remember the bet we settled on. I can't remember what we said. We had a yardage and touchdowns bet. So we'll go back to that episode and figure it out. I can't remember.
Oh, I remember. I remember his side. Yeah. So, I don't remember I remember what he has to do. I don't remember the numbers attached to what Charlie has to, accomplish this year or whatever. But let's say he doesn't get to where, you guys agreed on, and meaning you win the bet. Kadri has to get in did I say a pink suit? through one of my tailors in town, I think, that I do some work with. I think that was it. And he has to play 18 holes in a full suit or tuxedo. So we will revisit that. We have the tape. We have the receipts. We'll get to that in just a bit. Sticking with people, this is not a troll job. This is one of our guys right here. Cole Jackson, of course, from Ravens Twitter wants to know, why is offensive line the most important position in football? And I think we all know the reason why he's asking, don't we?
We do. Cole Jackson's the offensive line guru. He likes to do all the film study on that. You got to train yourself over years to look at a tape and be able to grade these guys up front. So of course on Twitter, I replied to Cole. I said, Cole, you're clearly the most qualified guy to answer this. So why don't you give me an answer and I will read it on air. So here's what he says. And I actually think it's pretty insightful. He says the offensive line is the heartbeat of your team. I'd want to say the heartbeat of your offense, but maybe it's the team. Okay. The offensive line is the heartbeat of your team. You have to rely on elite talent at both QB and wide receiver to overcome a poor offensive line. However, achieving that elite talent is rare. A top offensive line can power a good defense without elite skill positions. And then he puts a parentheses similar to 2019 Ravens and their run blocking. And he followed up. He's like, wait a minute. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is through the roof, but the skill positions at wide receiver were certainly nothing to write home about. And Mark Ingram was good, but he also was a little bit older in age, and he still got 1,000 yards. I agree. I mean, wide receiver is definitely a dependent position. You have to depend both on the offensive line and you got to depend on the quarterback. Quarterback is a little bit of a dependent position because you have to rely on the offensive line. And so, yeah, if you have like an average quarterback or average skill players, an offensive line can open up holes for them. They can run through it. They can get open, all that kind of stuff. And so, but if you have a terrible offensive line, like if Lamar has a terrible offensive line, there's only so much he can do. So I like that heartbeat of the offense.
Yeah. Love it, Cole. Appreciate you as always. And we got to follow up with him too, because we've been talking about, for a while now when we're going to have him on. So let's do that either at some point pre-training camp, during training camp, or just, generally speaking before the start of the season, because we always love having him on and, we always appreciate his time. This is not necessarily a question, but a suggestion. So I'll run through it real quick before we get to our next tweet submission. Comes in from DD. This was via email. Again, BaltimoreRavensVault@gmail.com is where you can reach us. And essentially what DD is suggesting is that we do a State of the Division series or episode before the start of the 2023 season. You and I both kind of talked about this quickly, and of course he's talking about the AFC North. I think it's a great idea. We'll definitely effort, some ideas there for different guests that we can have on, because, Sarah and I are obviously entrenched in everything that, encompasses the Ravens, which is a full-time job in itself for both of us. So we are definitely going to have some plans in the works to make sure that you can understand as much of what's at stake in the division and what the Ravens are going to be going up against, twice a season in terms of, their divisional opponents coming up this year. Next question comes in through Bic Flair at Krypton's Saving on Twitter. If each of you could poach one player from any AFC North team to add to the Ravens, but you had to cut one player in Baltimore, who would it be? I took a quick look at this before we went on, and to me, this is easy. I love Trey Hendrickson's game for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is their defensive end. He is a game wrecker. He has given the Ravens fits over the years. And so I'm taking Trey Hendrickson. And unfortunately, even though he's been on a great tear and somebody who the Ravens have really built up and developed, I'm going to have to cut. And I assume that he means, and he didn't specify this, so maybe I'm just jumping to conclusions, but I assume you had to cut a starter in order to bring this guy in. So if that's the case, I'm going to have to part ways with Broderick Washington. What do you got, Sarah?
Was Hendrickson the one that returned the touchdown that was fumbled by Tyler Huntley and basically turned the game around?
Was that Hendrickson?
You look it up while I while I give my guy. Yeah, my guy is I love Hendrickson. My guy is TJ Watt. Give me TJ Watt all day long. The Steelers don't have a quarterback really to write home about. They've got, Pickens, and maybe he is better this year or whatever, but he's not like he's like a top 15 quarterback. And so it's hard to win with that. But when TJ Watt is on the field, the Steelers win. When TJ Watt's on the field, the offensive coordinators are staying up late at night. When TJ Watt is out on the field, I have a feeling that they're doing what Tom Brady did with Ed Reed, which is find number 20 on every play. You got to go and find where TJ Watt is. And do you bring over an extra blocker? You bring in over a tight end, or you bring in a running back to come over there and help, the right tackle or the left tackle, get him away from your quarterback. I mean, this guy, just like you said with Hendrickson, is a game changer. He's brutal. So I would take him. And to me, it's easy. Again, I'm also assuming he's not saying that you can cut any Joe Schmo like the sixth guy on your depth chart. So I'm cutting Odafe Oweh for him.
Yeah. Another one of their defensive ends, by the way, is Sam Hubbard, and he's the one who returned it 98 yards to the house and broke the hearts of everybody in Baltimore after Tyler Huntley's decision to try and break the plan. So, yeah.
Also wasn't the best play call, but yes.
It wasn't. You're right. I remember going back and forth with you on that a few months back, but let's keep moving here. Gavin Stutler at G Stutler on Twitter. How effective do you think that Mark Andrews will be this season with all the new wide receiver additions? P.S. He's only over just over 1,400 yards away from becoming the Ravens' all-time receiving leader, which is kind of depressing, but it also speaks to how productive he's been in such a short amount of time. We've talked about this in recent weeks, Sarah. Mark is, he's a mainstay, and he's a staple of this offense. I don't see him going anywhere. Will his numbers be affected, decreased perhaps a little bit, tweaked, whatever you want to name, whatever you want to call it, because of the revamped wide receivers and how much depth they have at tight end? Maybe, but I still think he's going to be the go-to across the middle. I still think he's going to be the go-to when they need 7, when they need 8, like we mentioned. We think Odell's going to be that kind of guy as well when the game's on the line or when you're trying to close out a game. So to sit here and think that, he's not going to be effective anymore. I'm not saying Gavin's getting at that, but that's not going to be the case whatsoever. They're not just going to forget about JK. They're not just going to forget about Mark. There's going to there's only one mouth to feed. There's only so many mouths to feed. As Todd Monken has talked about throughout this process, but these guys, you can't get away from what you do best, I guess is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, according to Kadri, it's not going to be the wide receivers that takes, Mark Andrews' role. It's going to be Charlie Kolar. So, no, I agree with you. So just to kind of review the last couple years. So last year he had 847 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. Now it was 2021 where he went off. He had almost 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns. I in no way see him repeating that, but I don't see how anybody could repeat that. Then 2019 year, when it was both him and Hayden Hurst there, he had 852 yards. So, I just think that the comfort there, I mean, even when we saw videos coming out from mandatory minicamp, we still kept seeing highlights of him finding Mark Andrews all over the place. I just don't think that's going away. I think he could very much repeat what he did last year. 850 yards and 5 touchdowns. I definitely think he can still do that.
Who knows, too, if anything, with all the new playmakers around him, he may have a career year. You just never know, right? So we'll have to see.
This will be like the first time in pretty much forever that not just double teams, but he'd have triple teams, and Lamar has still thrown it to him. And so it's like, if you got a healthy OBJ, he's going to actually be going one-on-one sometimes. That could make it to where maybe he doesn't have as many catches, but he can be way more effective and get back to like 16 yards per catch instead of like 8 or 10,
yep.
So
pick your poison.
Bobby, I had to throw this last question in there just to have fun. I think it's crazy. I mean, just a couple months ago, our mailbags were literally only about Lamar Jackson. It was like, can we find one other question that's not Lamar Jackson? I don't think we had any Lamar Jackson questions today. And we had a ton of questions. We didn't even get all of them. And I think all the ones that we left off, we didn't get to. But this one was just having fun from Mark Esposito, who wrote the Fire Greg Roman notes. I have no idea, but I got to tell you, Tyus Bowser just conveniently there to like
tweet it, to Instagram story it.
Yeah. You'd think he'd be like the last guy who did it because he's the one who videoed it and put it up. But it's kind of like you know, you smelt it, you dealt it kind of a thing. So
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's so funny because if you were to pick a guy who, and if you know Tyus at all, and you've had a chance to talk to him, yeah, you know that he is so team friendly. He's willing to do anything you need, media obligations. He's a PR guy's best friend. He's soft spoken. He's kind. So clearly, wrong, right time, wrong person, or whatever wrong place at the wrong time type of thing for Tyus. I do think that we should fish around for this over the next few couple months we have before the season begins, because as we've started to learn, guys are becoming more comfortable. They're coming out of the woodwork to talk about this. I know Orlando Brown is most recently, we shared a soundbite from him, and he's no longer with the team, so that might be easier for him to speak on it than it would be somebody that's still in Baltimore. But I am so curious about this. I do think that I would be willing to bet that it was a player. I don't think it was somebody like.
I was going to say, do you think it was like a player? I was going to say, I don't think it is.
You don't think it is? For some reason, I think that you have to be. I was gonna say you don't get that frustrated, to go ahead and write something like that if you're not, actually. Well, organizations are such tight. Everybody's in it. It's their livelihoods, right? So it could, for all I know, it could be somebody in the personnel department. It could be player development. I mean, it could be anybody.
It could be marketing. It could be the lunchroom. It could be a FedEx guy.
Yeah. You're right. What am I saying? Why do I think it's a player? I don't know. I mean, I just feel like it was found in that outside foyer, right? So like in order to get there, I guess you could be somebody that's dropping off a package, right? Like it's not actually like into the building, past the access, past the front doors. So I guess that kind of leaves it up to interpretation. I don't know.
I don't know. I threw this in as a joke, but it sounds like you want to like for real dig into it and talk to guys. I'm ready to move on from it. I was just putting it in as a joke to end on a laughing note.
I got my investigative reporting hat on. I want to get to the bottom of this.
You do you, bro. I like it.
That is hilarious. You throw it in as like a final, like, let's send these guys off. It's vacation week. Let's have fun with it. I'm over here like deep diving. I got my like specs on. Oh, goodness gracious. Maybe one day it'll just pop up and right into our laps, So anyway, we always enjoy these mailbags because, it's a way for us to, kind of show our appreciation to you guys that listen to us every single day, that make us, you make us your number one habit and your destination, either in the morning, working out, grocery stores, walking, running, you name it. And we just appreciate you guys. So, as always, if you want to become more involved with what we're doing, like I mentioned at the top, you can check out what we're offering on Patreon. It's patreon.com/RavensVault podcast. Whether or not you are an owner of a small business in Baltimore or outside of Baltimore, or you want to have a monthly shout out to hear your name as a way of just, kind of giving you an extra incentive to listen every single day, or you want to have a submission monthly that is guaranteed to be read and analyzed in our monthly mailbags. All those have different level tiers in Patreon. We think it's a great way to get more involved in what we do, and we appreciate you. So anything else before we jump?
I don't think so. I hope everybody's enjoying their 4th of July week before we ramp back up. So happy 4th of July to everybody.
Yeah, and we'd love some feedback too. You may have noticed in the last week or so that we've been experimenting with different formatting for Morning Vault episodes. We would love to, get some feedback from you, whether that's, hitting us up by email or tweeting at us or whatever, because, we're just kind of experimenting before the start of the season. Do you like the 15 to 20 minute structured, kind of scripted out format, or do you like when we go off the cuff? We're going in with a plan. We're not necessarily improvising the entire time, but there's less structure to what we've been doing in the last week or so compared to, traditional Morning Vault format. So we'd love to get some feedback from you before we make some decisions there, final wise. And, we will talk to you soon. So as always, appreciate the support. I'm Bobby Trossett. Sarah Ellison's here as well. And we, you guys are the best. Thanks so much for dropping us inside the vault.